It's a Saturday night. The moon is full, and the breeze is crisp. We join a couple of teen musicians on their way to a gig at a friend's party across town. Stan, a 17-year-old with long blonde hair and a wise-ass attitude to match his young machismo image. Followed by Tina, a 16-year-old diva who plans to be a famous pop star someday once she leaves this stuffy town. And lastly, we have Daniel, a typical 18-year-old burnout who can play the drums rather well for his nonchalant attitude. We join the group as they are running behind for their first gig in 4 months. "We're already 45 minutes late. I don't want to waste any more time," complained Stan. "Fine, let's cut through the graveyard then, my dudes," responded Daniel. No, that's okay. I'd rather we didn't," Tina chimed in. "Well, if you want to make this party on time, we really don't have a choice," Stan said firmly. I don't know, Stan. I would rather we just walk around than cut through," replied Tina. You could hear the shaky discomfort in her voice. "It's 3 miles around, Tina, and time stands for no man," Daniel said as he sparked up a doobie. "I'm telling you, we can shave 1.5 miles off our walk if we cut through the Bemosey Hills Cemetery," claimed Stan with a booming confidence in his voice. Tina stands at the entrance of the cemetery gate and ponders if the shortcut was really worth it. Stan began to pressure her. "Remember, we're only late because you took so long on your makeup." Daniel pushed the rusty gates open, or at least as far as they would spread while still chained shut. Stan wiggled his way through. Daniel continued to hold the gate as he waved for Tina to enter next. "M'lady?" Tina begrudgingly took a deep breath, following an overdramatic sigh. "Fine, you both win, but can we pick up the pace? Graveyards really freak me out," said Tina. The 3 teens pushed onward into the graveyard. The eerie mist lined the ground, creeping along ever so slowly. The moon was high in the autumn night. Crickets sang and the wind whistled. "What was that?" Tina screamed out. "Silence. Pure, serene silence," proclaimed Daniel. "What was what?" Stan asked angrily. I thought I heard something," Tina stammered to say. Daniel said in a joking manner, "Maybe it's zombies." "Brains! I want your brains!" "That's not funny, Daniel," Tina sneered. "I thought I heard something in the distance." "Like what?" scoffed Stan. It sounded like an animal, like maybe a coyote or a wolf," Tina said nervously. "Oh, shit," Daniel said softly. "What?" Stan asked in a grumpy manner. "Nothing, we might want to pick up the pace," Daniel said nervously. "Not such a wise ass now, are we?" Tina asked smugly. Another howl could be heard, a little closer than the first one. This time it echoed through the area, bouncing off the gravestones, silencing the crickets. "Okay, that one I heard," proclaimed Stan, a bit uneasy. "And just like that, I remembered this graveyard was built on the edge of Wailing Woods," announced Stan. "Wailing Woods?" Tina asked, confused. "Tina, you moved here about 3 years ago, right?" Stan asked, showing concern, which was a bit out of character for him. "Yeah, that's right," Tina responded as she picked up the pace in her step. "Well, you didn't grow up here, but essentially there's an old wives' tale about these woods in particular," Stan muttered as he lit a cigarette. "One that our family and friends would tell us when we were just little kids. If you weren't home by dark, then you probably weren't coming home at all," Daniel added as he walked backwards while shifting his eyes back and forth as if he was looking for something. "Our parents used to tell us about how kids who didn't make it home before the streetlights were on would just disappear," Stan said as he took another drag from his lit cigarette. "The biggest number of disappearances all happened near the very same woods we're walking by," Daniel said in a dark manner. "It was revealed that through the playground rumors, the disappearances were caused by the Wolfman," Stan said grimly as he flicked the half-smoked stogie. "The what?" Tina asked, confused. "The Wolfman of Wailing Woods lived alone in the tangled growth. He hunted in the light of the full moon," Daniel claimed. "There was a large string of disappearances that took place between 1993 and 1995. Once a month, 1 or 2 people would vanish. The town went on full lockdown." Stan paused for just a moment. The talk of a serial killer began to circulate around town. Things got really strange when one day they finally found a body. Well, part of a body, Daniel said as he raised his coat over his head to simulate a headless corpse. Tina stayed quiet, listening ever so intensely. They found the body in late '95 here in the cemetery, right at the edge of the woods, Stan said as he looked towards the brush that was a mile-long backdrop of the cemetery. A body is a bit of an overstatement. I would say they found a partial skeleton with weird grooves on it that resembled teeth marks, Daniel chimed in. The body was buried in a shallow grave that was haphazardly dug without any tools, Stan added. You mean like whoever dug it used their bare hands? Tina asked. Or claws, Daniel shrugged. The teens were over halfway through Bemosey Hills Cemetery when a fierce howl erupted from across the woods where they were from. Chills ran down their spines. I'm starting to think being late wouldn't have been such a bad thing, Stan muttered under his breath. As the group climbed the last hill in the cemetery, something broke the eerie, uncomfortable silence the teens were sharing. Help me, please, help me! A plea for help could be heard in the distance. Did you hear that? The boys stood and looked at each other. Nope, Stan said nervously. Daniel gave Stan a jab in the right arm and said, Come on, dude. We all heard that shriek. Daniel then changed directions and began walking with purpose towards the Wailing Woods. Stan attempted to stop Daniel as he pleaded for him to use reason. Daniel, why do you think it's called Wailing Woods? Because that's where the Wolfman takes his victims. Those are screams of a dead woman, and you know it. Tina followed reluctantly as Daniel led the group closer to the Wailing Woods. Stan continued his desperate attempt to stop them. Daniel, you know it as well as I do. People still go missing here. Or have you already forgotten about your brother? Daniel stopped and beamed at Stan. There was a tension that was so potent, it outweighed everyone's fear. Daniel slugged Dan and knocked him flat on his ass, and took off into the Wailing Woods. What the hell was that? Tina asked as she offered Stan a helping hand up. So maybe the legends about this place are true, Stan said as he looked at the ground while getting up. No one told me Daniel had a brother, Tina said, confused and angry. He had, is the correct term. Daniel had an older brother named Alex. He was 4 years older than us. One summer the three of us were camping in their backyard when there was a loud roar barreled from out of the opening of the woods, followed by a high-pitched scream. Look, we need to find Daniel, but I will fill you in as we go. Come on, Stan said as he started sprinting towards the direction of the sound had come from. That night that we were all camping, I thought I saw something or someone when I got up to take a piss in the middle of the night. I woke up Alex since he was the oldest of the group and asked him to check outside because I was too scared. I should have gone and gotten their dad. Stan showed a look of pain and regret as the two ran deeper into Wailing Woods. Alex bravely left the tent, and a few moments later there was a blood-curdling scream. The sounds of a one-sided struggle could be heard as something attacked and took Alex with it. I was too scared to move. The screams of pain and terror were enough to wake the neighbors as well as Alex and Daniel's parents. Once the police were called in, it didn't take them long to make it a missing persons case and drop it completely. Stan continued his story. Alex's family combed the nearby land but never found anything more than a few drops of blood leading to the Wailing Woods. Daniel blamed me for what happened, even though we were just kids. That's why he's always stoned. He uses it to mask his pain. A loud shout could be heard from up ahead. No, stop! That's Daniel! Tina cried out. Stan and Tina had finally reached a small clearing where the moonlight shone through, revealing a tall, gray, hairy monster. It was a large wolf of some kind, or a humanoid dog. It had a piercing gaze with rich, thick, amber eyes. The legends, they're true, Tina said in a quiet, defeated voice. The wolfman stood on its hind legs and stared Daniel down. He was in front of a girl who was laying on the ground, possibly unconscious, possibly worse. Daniel! Tina shouted. Get out of there! Big mistake, as Daniel looked away for only a second and broke eye contact with the beast. The wolfman let out a powerful roar. Daniel attempted to get in its path, but it knocked him out of the way. The creature was down on all fours, dashing towards Tina and Stan. Without a moment's hesitation, Stan shoved Tina out of the way, and the wolfman tackled him to the ground. Stan lay pinned to the ground, silently waiting for it all to end. Stop it, Alex! Daniel shouted angrily as he clung to the wolfman's neck. The wolfman paused for a moment, looking confused. Alex? Tina shouted, confused and shocked. I thought he was dead. No, not dead, just not himself anymore, Daniel shouted in frustration as he wrangled his brother. Stan looked up and began to speak loudly to the monster. Alex, I'm sorry. I don't know if you recognize me, but it's me, Stanley. We used to be friends. The wolfman stared down at Stan. Seconds felt like hours. Alex, let him go. You're better than this, Daniel growled in a stern voice. Just as the wolfman finally let Stan out from under him, the girl who was thought to be dead sits up and screams when she sees Alex. Alex went crashing towards the unnamed girl and toppled over her. No! Screamed Daniel from the top of his lungs. I don't understand what's happening, Tina blurted out. Alex was scratched by a dogman. He's stuck in an animal-like appearance now. Like a werewolf? Tina asked. Daniel and Stan attempted to pry the dogman off the unnamed stranger. No, werewolves are Hollywood mumbo-jumbo. What this is real, Daniel shouted as he attempted to wrestle Alex. Try as they might, the boys were unsuccessful. A loud, painful snapping sound could be heard from underneath Alex. The unnamed woman fell silent and limp. God damn it! Daniel cried out in frustration. Stan then asked him, I don't understand. Is this something that runs in your family, or was your family the ones who were responsible for the missing people from 93 to 95? What? No. Look, the disappearances that happened in the 90s were the previous pack. Pack? Like, you mean more than one? Tina asked, frightened. Yes. Once the town discovered that body here on the edge of Wailing Woods, they combed the forest, and they hunted them and killed them all, or so they thought. But there was one lone survivor. The Alpha had escaped the mob's fury. This was the same one that transferred this curse to Alex, Daniel explained solemnly. So it wasn't my fault after all, Stan said with a sigh of relief. No, it's entirely your fault. You were chosen. The Alpha from the pack that was exterminated had blood relations to you, Stan, Daniel said angrily. Tina stayed quiet as her friends began to exchange dark secrets. How would you even know that? Stan stammered nervously. Our father. He found Alex 4 days after his disappearance, chained up to a large tree in the center of Wailing Woods. An elderly man sat across a fire watching him. The man that scratched Alex had kept him close by until the transformation from boar to beast was complete. When our father had found him, he still had those amber eyes, even as a human-like form. Alex was nearly transformed into what you see before you now. My family extracted all the information we could from the geezer before my dad decided to place him out of his misery. Now what to do with Alex? Dad didn't have the heart to put him down. After long negotiation with the town sheriff, it was agreed that Wailing Woods was marked off limits and Alex would be safe on the condition that we kept him fed so he doesn't do his hunting on the town's population. Wow, I can't believe this, Tina said, trying to process all this information at once. Stan angrily asked, If you knew, then why would you let us take this shortcut? Alex doesn't leave the woods. He knows better. Now, if someone enters them, that's a whole other situation then, Daniel said softly. Which, by the way, I had solved until you two showed up. So what do you guys do, a drive-by once a month, throw him a dead cow and call it good? Stan asked, frustrated. No, we weekly deliver him meat from our farm. It keeps him held over so he isn't tempted to hunt, Daniel said as he patted his brother's back. Meanwhile, the whole time Alex is going to town on that stranger's corpse. But right now, believe it or not, we have a bigger issue, Daniel said as he pointed to Stan's arm. Stan looked down, and then looked back up terrified. No, this can't be happening! Stan had 3 prominent claw marks raked across his arm. Tina gasped at the realization of what was happening. It's ironic, Daniel said as he pulled a blunt out from his coat pocket and sparked it. This was originally meant for you anyway, and through sheer dumb luck it's found its way back to you. I guess that's why they call it a curse, huh, Stan? Daniel said grimly. Daniel, we gotta do something. We can't let Stan morph into another wolfman, pleaded Tina. Dogman! Daniel's voice boomed as he corrected her. There's nothing I can do now. There's nothing we can do, he said as he took another drag. Stan fell to his knees as he gripped his forearm in pure shock. We've tried multiple ways to stop it. We cannot remove it, and we cannot cure it. In the last decade, the only thing my family's achieved is learning that it's spread through scratches and bites. And Stan's been scratched, Tina. You have to understand what's happening. So what? Alex walks free and now Stan's the new Dogman? Tina asked, upset. Sadly, nope, Daniel said coldly. Our uncle had stage 4 cancer, and he attempted to let Alex scratch him in the hopes that the curse would transfer over to him like it did from Stan's great-grandfather. No such luck, though. He turned and we agreed that if he turned, we'd end his suffering as a whole. There's a secret Stan's great-grandfather took with him to the grave on how to set a host free, so now all we can do is contain it. Daniel paused and looked up at the moon as he took a fat rip from the blunt. Go home, Tina. You need to forget what you saw here tonight. Stan's transferring to an all-male boarding school immediately due to family crisis. That is the story that you will tell anyone who may ask if you know what happened to Stan. What about you? Tina asked in a sad, shaky voice. Daniel paused and took a deep breath. I'm a burnout. It's half expected that people like me drop out at some point. Might as well play the stereotype. He then let out a large cloud of smoke, followed by a couple coughs. Will I see you again? Tina asked, worried as she was losing both her best friends in one foul swoop. Well, it may not be the best idea, but I'll try to stay in contact when I'm not full-time beast-sitting out here with our new soon-to-be furry friend. You really think Stan can't be trusted? Tina questioned, upset. Daniel calmly responded. It's not up to Stan anymore. He may want to behave, but the animal instinct is a lot stronger than you think. It's going to take some time to get him grounded and acclimated to his new home in the Wailing Woods. Tina left Daniel to clean up the mess that had unfolded that night. She still plans on leaving this town and becoming a pop star once she's graduated, but every now and again when the moon is full, Tina happens to catch the sight of two pairs of glowing amber yellow eyes across the street in the wooded area, alongside a solo howl now and again. She stays in due to the fear that she'll become like Stan, trapped in the life of a dogman. It was 10 years ago to this very date. I've sort of turned what happened into a tradition of sorts. Every year, since it happened, I come to the same spot in hopes I get another chance to serve it. It's been a year since I last saw it, on that cool autumn night. I try my best to recreate what happened here every anniversary. At the time of the very first encounter, I was hiking with my girlfriend. It was dusk and we decided to make camp for the night. She gathered the firewood, I pitched the tent, and we nestled in for the evening. After we cooked dinner over the open flame, we decided to toast up a few marshmallows, and we made a couple of s'mores. I glanced at my watch, and it was almost 11 p.m. We both were tired, and we decided we'd turn in for the evening. My girlfriend was a light sleeper. I, however, slept like a rock. A little after 2 a.m., my girlfriend shook me awake. Groggy, I asked her what was wrong. She told me she had heard something outside the tent. Well, I pulled my coat on, and I went to check it out. The moon was out in full glow tonight, giving life to the onyx forest below. I started to patrol the perimeter of our campsite. Aside from the wind blowing and a cool, crisp breeze, it was silent. No crickets to be heard, just eerie silence. After a few minutes, my girlfriend popped out of the tent to check on me. She called out to me, "Rick, is everything okay?" I turned around to answer, but that's when I saw it. A dark, large figure standing behind the tent. It had to be 6 or 7 feet. The one thing that was burned into my brain were those eyes. Bright, robust amber eyes with thin slits for pupils. They shone in the dark like a lighthouse on the shore of any sea. I went to call out to warn my girlfriend, but I wasn't quick enough. Swiftly and quietly, it leapt over our tent and pounced on her. She began to let out a scream, but was silenced in an instant when the beast bit down on her neck. I was frozen in place. Grief and shock, terror and fear overwhelmed me. What had I let happen to my beloved? As quickly as it appeared, the creature vanished with my girlfriend's corpse in its mouth. I dropped to my knees and began to quietly sob. What was I to do? I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't call for help. If I somehow did get people to believe me, we were so far away from civilization, and she was already gone. I sat by the fire for the rest of the night. I decided if it was my time to go, I wasn't going to fight it. I waited almost hoping it would happen. Hoping it would come back for me, pleading with fate just to join my girlfriend in the afterlife. Hours went by, nothing happened, and eventually the sun rose. I did some investigating around the area of the attack. Aside from a few splotches of blood scattered around the soil and on the leaves, you couldn't even tell anything had happened there. I spent most of the morning in denial, thinking I had made the whole thing up. She wasn't dead. She just went to get more firewood, or had to use the ladies' room. Eventually noon rolled around, and I came to the realization she was gone, and I indeed let it happen. After a quiet sob in a morning session, I made a promise to myself. I may not be able to save her, but I can sure as hell avenge her. I did my best to clean up the small scene from where she was murdered by that thing. Then I packed up the campsite. I sat for about another hour before I pulled out my global navigator. I captured the coordinates of my location, and I memorized the exact numbers to the degree. I then placed both her and my own pack on, and I started down the trail we'd climbed together the day before. Days turned to weeks. Weeks became months. Eventually almost a full year passed, and no one even reached out about my girlfriend. I knew she had moved here from out of town, but this was almost depressing. No family nor friends ever showed up looking for her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing staring at me. Its large glowing eyes peering across the darkness, casting silent judgment onto me. I saw her death every time I dreamt. It was the same thing. I couldn't save her, even in this fabrication of reality. This ate at my soul for a long while before I came to the decision. I needed to go back. I had to face down the thing that haunted the darkest corners of my mind. I was afraid to go alone, so I asked a close friend if she'd be willing to join me on the camping trip for the weekend. She knew I had been off ever since what everyone assumed was my big breakup, and agreed to go if it would help cheer me up. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what I had really planned to do. She would have thought that I was crazy. Hell, at this point I might be, but my life was caught in an impassable situation that I needed to overcome. I must overcome. There was no choice in the matter. I bought a gun and enough bullets to kill anything I may come across twice over. I waited anxiously till the weekend hit, and then I packed up my gear and my firearm, and I went and collected my friend for our trip. I set this trip for the same date as the last trip. The anniversary had finally come. My friend's name was Rachel. She was 26 at the time. I was only a year younger than my previous girlfriend. Looking at them from behind, you could easily have mixed them up. We passed a bit of small talk back and forth as we drove to the location of the trail for the hike. Once we arrived, I just sat and looked out the window, up towards those trails that tormented my every waking minute. As we unloaded our equipment, I placed my piece in the back of my pants. I then started up the trail. We made good time and we pushed towards the coordinates that changed my life forever. Time felt as though it had staggered by in slow motion. My heart felt as though it was beating out of my chest. Finally, we reached the spot. I recommended we stop and make camp. Rachel had no protest to this. We began setting up our tents next to each other. The world faded away as I fell into a trance. All I could hear was a ringing noise, kind of like a high-pitched frequency. If you have tinnitus, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't feel like I had control of my body. I was completely on autopilot. It felt as though I was having an existential breakdown on the inside, while I remained calm and collected on the outside. What if this thing really came back? Would I be prepared? Would Rachel suffer the same fate as my girlfriend did? Rick. After the third time, I finally snapped out of my daze when I noticed Rachel was calling my name. She asked me if I was okay, as I just kept staring off into the distance. I assured her I was fine, I was just taking nature in. When honestly, I was a few moments away from completely losing my shit. As the sun began to set, I volunteered to gather the firewood. After the fire was built and dinner was made, we ate. A bit of time went by, and some more small talk was passed back and forth, and then we decided to roast marshmallows. Rachel spent the majority of the evening flirting with me, and even asked if I'd like to sleep in the tent with her tonight. I didn't want to seem any more off than I already had, so I took her up on the offer. A few hours had passed, and she had dozed off. I lay idle, staring at the ceiling of the tent. When I finally started to drift off, that's when it happened. As I closed my eyes, this familiar sense of dread came over me. I started to hyperventilate, and I couldn't describe it, but it's like I had a sixth sense. What I had come here to do was finally upon me. I sat up in a cold sweat. My hand shook as I reached for the zipper of the tent. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. With a quick haste, I opened the flap and stormed out of the tent. I swept my surroundings. Nothing. Had I really made it all up? I checked my watch. It was 2:23 a.m. As I gave up and began to return to the warmth of my sleeping bag, something caught my attention. Off in the distance, I saw it. Those two glowing eyes appeared from behind a tree. Was this thing playing with me? I began to approach the floating vermilion orbs, when just as quickly as they appeared, they vanished again. I started to panic, as I knew this thing was somewhere out there, but I couldn't tell where it was in this environment's lighting. I heard a branch snap from behind me, and I spun around expecting to be pounced on like my girlfriend had been last year. In the distance, I saw the eyes reappear. I started to run full speed with my gun drawn. This was it. I was finally going to have my revenge. As I sprinted mindlessly towards the monster, I heard a scream. Rachel? I spun around, my adrenaline pumping and my heart heavy, as I came face to face with it, the monster that had haunted my psyche for so long, and in its clutches was Rachel. I gripped my gun as I began to shake. Damn it, Rick! Be a man! Face this nightmare and save your friend! I pointed the pistol directly in front of me with both hands. I took off the safety and began to let out a deep breath as I slowly squeezed the trigger. I let off a single round and I missed. The creature chomped down on Rachel's jugular and it took her life with a single bite. I dropped to my knees teary-eyed and I let out a scream. My voice echoed through the forest and the trails. A second one emerged shortly after. The two creatures resembled dogs. They kind of reminded me of werewolves, or dogmen. I guess they were dogmen. The dogmen started to devour Rachel's corpse in tandem. I shouted out in anger, "Is this what you wanted? To fully rip out my heart?" The creatures continued to eat, completely ignoring me. The dogmen ate their share and took what was left of Rachel and vanished as quickly as they had come. I didn't understand how I could let this happen a second time. I sat out in the wilderness for about 2 days, not moving from the spot I had watched them ruin my life a second time. I searched every corner of my mind for any possible reason this could happen, and after I finally gave it enough thought, I came to the conclusion that there was a reason this happened. There's a reason that God would put me through this, and it finally had dawned on me. If everything did happen for a reason, then there must be a valid reason here. I was the chosen one. I was chosen to feed them. I decided that I'd make lemonade out of the lemon life had decided to deal me. I mean, why else would they let me go 2 times in a row? Who was I to question the will of the dogman? After cleaning up the campsite, I headed back down the trail. I drove straight to a local junkyard, and I disposed of Rachel's camping gear. I placed it in the trunk of an old Jetta that was marked to be crushed. I then returned home and I put away my gear, and I decided I would wait. I went through the next year watching the calendar extremely close and waiting for the anniversary to dawn once again. And when it did, I would take my next unsuspecting victim to feed the dogman. Now, I almost forgot, to my former girlfriend and Rachel, happy anniversary. Well, it looks like you survived to the end of the video. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to these scary tales I've written myself. If you did enjoy, maybe consider liking and subscribing. There's more spooky content just around the corner. I've had these on my phone for quite a while, and you'll notice the audio content on the second story was not that great. I plan to actually correct that in future stories, and I actually sat on these for a while considering if I should even release them, but I decided since I did put work into them, they both deserve their own video. So, I hope you enjoyed 2 terrifying dogman tales to chill your bones. Oh, and remember, my beloved viewers, you never know what goes bump in the night.